So, hi everybody and welcome back. This is Unreal Engine 5 tutorial series for absolute beginners. This is video 140, and in this video we continue with our blueprint communication, which means just how can you access a blueprint and how can a blueprint access another blueprint. And I showed you all time my simple example, which is just when you start here the game. Okay, what's happening here? Anyway, let's start here the game. You go into this box here, and then something happens. Normally you go into this box, this is my first blueprint, and then you can communicate with another blueprint. For example, this one is my light blueprint, but it must be not necessarily a blueprint. For example, it can be also a static mesh actor, but there are certain things which you can do only with blueprints, and in general we are talking now how we communicate to each other. And in this video we are talking about interfaces. And I already started one video 4 videos ago. I think I started how to create an interface, and we created this interface here, which was this one here, but I make a fast recap again. So how you create this interface here, you go to your folder, interface, right click, go to blueprints. In this blueprint section you have here different options, and one says blueprint interface, and then you can call it. I call it blueprint interface, shortcut BPI and underscore interface, for example, in this case interface. And then you can open this one up, and when you open this up, I dock it here on top, I compile, save this, and now you can see here we can select here this node here which says function, but we can't do anything in this window, which means we can't implement here a functionality. But what we can do here on the right side, you can see we have here functions. This function here is actually this function here, and when I recall this, let's call this one here activate just. Let's call this activate, and activate, yes, you have now one function who can be implemented later, not in this place. That's very important to know. And here's one more thing important to know, and there are two, and then of course you have to compile and save, but here is one more thing important to know. First of all, you can have here in details panel some options, and one option is setting, for example, an output or an input. But important is that if you have no output, which means you have here not a return function, this will present it later when you implement it as an event. But if you have a return value, let's create one more function with a return value so you can see what I mean. I go here on top where it says functions, and I go here to this plus sign, I click on plus, and you see I'm creating now another function, and let's call this function, for example, with return type. Okay, activate with return type, something like so. Activate with return type. And if you have a function like this, you can see I can click on this one, it's switched to this function. Here I have no return type, I activate this one. Right now it has also no return type, but when you click on this one again and go down here in details, you can see you have here inputs and outputs. You can set if you want an input, but if you make an output, let's make here an output. I make here a plus sign just for demonstration purposes, and then you can choose here which type you want. This is just a demonstration, so I keep this bool here, and I call this just success, for example. And important is here now this two different functions. You can see this one here, I double click on this one here, it has only one node, no return type. I double click on the second function. Now this one has a return type. Why is this important? Let's compile and save this fast again. It is important because, like I said, later when you implement this interfaces, because here we can't implement this in this folder what we created. This interface itself can't implement functionality. You have to implement later this functionality, and when we implement them, then one is an event. For this one will be an event, and this one will be represented as a function. So with that said, let's close this, and go to implement this. And of course, like all time, here is the blueprint interface, which I showed you already in the last video. Here you can go to this documentation. I will link it again in the description. That we already did, and that I showed you right now here. But here, of course, you can read a little bit more details and so on. Next step is now here, this one here, this implementation, which we are going to do. It's also straightforward, very easy. And we are going to do this one here, and I explain it how it works. So what we have to do. So now, after we created this interface, here I have another one. That's not so important. We are concentrating right now on this one interface. You have to decide which blueprint or actor you want that this interface is implementing the function which you defined. What I mean with that, let's go back to our interface. Let's open up it fast again. So I have, for example, defined here an activate function. You can see this activate here is still a function, but here is no functionality. And that means now to implement this functionality, it's not possible here, but you can choose now a blueprint here in your scene and say, for example, I want again the same thing what I want like all time in my last videos. I want again go with my character in this box here, and when I go in this box, I want perhaps turn off this light, but this time I want make it with an interface. So I choose which blueprints should use interfaces first, and I say, okay, now I found this blueprint should an interface, right? Because I want go in and I want that this light will be turned off. And the only difference to the other things what I showed you in the last video is it is not used a dispatcher, it is not used a cast node, it is not used a direct access. It is just, this time we are just using interface. You see, these are all different kind of ways to accesses to use, and all time the same thing. Till now in all the videos I'm turning off this light, and in different ways. All right, so what I have to do now. So okay, I have selected, yes, I want use this blueprint here, and I want turn off the light, but this time I said, okay, with interface, which means I have to implement this interface here. But wait a minute, what means implement the interface here? Actually, my goal is I have here this function. I can't implement it here in this function, but when I add this interface to this blueprint here, I can implement this function actually when I added it to this blueprint. And that's it, how what we are going to do. First, you select what you want. I say, okay, I selected here. I have selected this one. Let's select it again. Then I go here to this blueprint. I can go here, or you can just find it where you have it. For example, you can make this one as well. Right click and go browse to asset, for example, and you see it pops up. You can double click here. And then here are some other codes which are not so important. That was also for demonstration purposes. And here you have now to do what? What you have to do. Like I said, you want use this interface here. We want, our goal is still to implement this functionality, because this interface self it can't implement. So I have choose now the light here. I have choose now the event graph here, and my goal is now to implement this interface functionality here. So I will try to find it. Where is the, it says here activate, but when I click right click and right here activate, you can see there happens nothing. And there is something, I think. No, that's not true. There is something already, but we talk not about this one. We will talk later about this one, but in normally you can't implement this. Or let me show you this one. Oh, okay. You see here are some kind of activates, and this one is our interface. And when I call this one, you can see this one is not implementing the interface. I need implement a functionality for that. This one is just calling the interface. So that helps me not. So how I can implement now this interface in my blueprint here, because I want to use an interface. And what you have to do before you can do this is add this interface to this blueprint. So which means this interface here not this function, this interface itself, you have to add to this blueprint. And how you can add this to the blueprint, you go here to the class settings. After you select this class settings on your blueprint, then you go here right to details, and you have here different kind of class settings. And we are interested in the section where it says interface. Then you can drop down these menus, and you have here two drop downs actually. The one drop down says if you have already inherited interface. If you don't know what inheritance means, no worry. That means there was already a parent. Let's say you have a parent class, and then you have inherited it from the parent, but that's not so important. We are concentrating on the first section, which says implemented interfaces. And implemented interfaces mean this word here is actually not accurate, because this section here is more added interfaces, because here what we do here actually is not implementing it. We are not implementing it here. We are doing just adding this interface here, what I have, the whole interface, to this section here. That's why it's a little bit inaccurate, and you will see why I say inaccurate in a moment. But let's add an interface. So let's add this interface. It's called your BP interface here, this on top. I'm adding not this one here. I'm adding this BP interface. And then I go here to this drop down add, and you can select interfaces, right? And there are many, but we don't care about the other ones. We care about our ones, which is called BPI interface. Here on top, this is which I defined. And after you added this one here, this is not implement. This is just an add. Then you can compile, save. So what we have done so far, so we just added here this interface to one blueprint. And now we are going to implement it. And that's this, before we go implement it, let me show you something. After you added this one here, and after you compiled here on top, then here when you go down to the my blueprint section here and go to interfaces, you see we have now two options there, and these two options, when you read them, are exactly our two available functions. And the difference about this one here, for example, activate, I can't do anything, but here I can implement them. And that was our goal, right? Because interface without a function makes no sense, but if we can implement them, now it makes sense. And what was my goal again? Like all time, I want to turn off this light, which means I have to implement now this functionality, turn off this light. And where I have to implement this is the next section. Now the implementation comes here and not here. Here on the right side in details panel, we are adding this one. That's why I said it's a little bit wrong to say here implemented interface, because let me add this one too. You can add here an interface, but you have not to implement it. And that's why I said this one is a little bit wrong. Normally you add it here. You can implement this one here, but you don't have to implement this one here. All right, anyway, that's not so important. Just a little bit to distinguish. Let's concentrate us how to implement now this interface. Well, what is my goal again? Yes, I want to turn off this light, but I want to use the interface, and the interface has these two functions, and one of this function I want, for example, to turn off the light. And I made these two examples only to demonstrate you that the one is calling an event. And which was on the event? The one with only one node is calling an event. The other one is just calling a function, so that you not get irritated with that. So, and you can call them like right click and search, but that's takes too long. Don't make that. Or make, if you want, you can search now, activate. Let's write here, activate. And now you can see you can find this activate implementation now anywhere. I don't know where, because there is a easier way to get this one. And what is the easy way? You go here to this interface, which was here, and we start now with the one, no, not with this one. We start to implement now the functionality for this one node. So I go here back to my light, here, and you just double click on this one, and that's it. And look what happens. Here it adds me a node, and this node is an event. That's very important. And now this event means if I call this interface, which I implemented here in this class settings, this event will fire. And this little symbol here indicates this is an interface, and you can see the symbol here is also here anyhow. The only difference is these two symbols, the one is grayed out, is a function, you will see it in a moment. And the other one here is just an event. And let's implement first the functionality. What do we wanted? Yes, I want to turn off this light. And I'm already in this light. And which means I can just grab the point light here, which is the component of my blueprint light. And I can set visibility like my all other videos off. And we make a very simple example like all time. So I go here and the visibility is set here. And we compile and save this one. And let's make here some comments as well. So here, let's write here set light visibility. Set light visibility off. Let's write all big. Then I have no thing. And then let's set the color here to this one. And set OK. And here, let's write here also a comment. Reacts to interface called. Let's to interface call like so a little bit. And then here also color. Okay, and we can make here one more comment here around for interface so that we distinguish. I have here already a thing interface anyway. What is that actually? Let's delete this one and make here interface comment interface. I think I tested this one already, so I can present this one a little bit. So with that said, you can see here is our implementation for this activate, and the functionality is I turn off the light. And important here, compile save like all time, but important is you can see we implement this functionality exactly there where we want to use the interface, and I want to use it at this light. Then I add it to this light. Then I go class, add it here, and then I implement it after that. And like I said, you don't have to implement this one, and that's very important to note later. About this we will talk also, but not right now. Right now I show you the other option, which is with a return type. And I said if you want to implement this version here, this one has a return type, and a return type will give you exactly this function here. What you can see here, you see this here, this node here is not exactly the same thing. Instead we have here a event node, but it looks similar, only that this one is an event node. And now we are going to implement this one. And when I go to my blueprint and go here to this interface sections and double click now on this one here, and it jumps out and goes to our function section, and you see this one looks exactly like this one here. And now we have to implement it, but this one was only for demonstration purposes, that's why don't implement it. And I said you don't have to implement it. All right, you can here also implement for example the same thing here like I did with this one here, turning light off. It's no problem, you can implement this one here as well, just to show it that it's possible. Let's make it fast. Set visibility. Let's set visibility and here. And even if it has here a return type, I can just set this one, and that would work also. This return type makes nothing. And you see, but I said also you don't have to implement it at all. You can keep it out. You can keep it like it is. You don't have to use it. You can use it. In this case, I don't use it, and that's why I said this one is not implemented interface. It is just added interface, and here are the implemented components if you have implemented them. This is the question. All right, with that said, let's continue and test this. Is this working already? because normally I have created our interface, I have added our interface. Let's go to our write function. And one more note here about this event and about this function. Keep in mind that a function can't use timers. For example, a delay node, you can't use this, and timer, something like that. And event can use it. I think you can use a timer indirectly here anyhow, but normally you should not use on a function a timer. That's very important to note here. And that's why this event here is a little bit more powerful, I think, without a return value. But that's a general, we can think about this later. That's not so important right now. Just a side note. Yeah, let's go and see if I can use this now. What was my goal again? Yes, I go here in, and now I have implemented here an interface, and it should turn off the slide. But the problem is, of course, I must call it anyhow. Till now, I have just implemented on the slide interface, right? That was all that what I did. I have never called it. So on this note here, I said, this one reacts exactly to a call, so I must call it. And where I call it again, and that is very important because you can call it from many million different places, but in this case I want walk with my character in this box. After my box, yes, it's after my character recognized by this box, I want call this interface, and it should turn off this light. So, and how I did this again, I select this box, for example. I go into this blueprint of the box, and you see this is all time the same thing what I used so far to demonstrate. But this time I go here on top. This is my box here again. This is my character. And now I want, if this is happening, this is exactly the same thing here. I go in, that it is calling now the interface of this light here, and it should turn off. So let's do this. So let's call here, there was a call right before you saw it, so this was called activate. So you should know what you want call. It says here activate. I want call this activate. Let's call activate here, activate. And the problem is we have here so many activates now. What is the right activate? And the right activate is probably here we have BP interface. This is our interface, and it says here activate message. And this message is important because we're sending a message. It's like sending a message because, yes, it is used like this. You have to find this BP activate, not this all, because this is another call. In my case, activate only. This here. And when you use this message, you can see here an envelope, which means I will send this, and I will send this to your interface. And when I compile, I get an error. And the reason for that is you still have to select the component which you want to message it. Yes, so which has this, the target. Target means all time where I should send this message here. Right now I have not selected, and we learned in our last videos there are different ways. For example, I make it now very simple. Instead of using get all actors of class, which you can, I get just an actor which I have defined in one of my earlier videos. What I mean with, I make an example from scratch so you can see it. You can go here to this variable, click a plus right here, for example, interface target. You can select here the right class, for example, or we learned also you can just select actor because all in the screen are actors, and then you go here to actor, and then you make, for example, an object reference, and then you can make this one instant editable, which means I can select it from the viewport. Let's do this one as well. Let's compile, save. I have still the problem because this one needs to connect, so I connect this one here now, get make it in, and now I can compile and save. But this one here works now, works not. The reason for that is because this one has to be selected. So when I select this one, go here right to the details panel, down, you can see here the default value is not selectable here because I made it selectable from the viewport. What is the viewport again? It is here this way, and now I can select it. But how I select it? First of all, just go to your place where you defined it. For example, you can see it is defined in BP trigger active all. And what is this BP trigger active all in my scene? Here, it is my box here. Here I have defined this access. And now, after you selected this one, you go to details panel. And in details panel default, you have here the different variables, and you can see I have already many variables here, and this all variables are public. You can see from viewport accessible. You can see all this ice here means I can access it, and you can see it here are all the variables. And in my case, what was our variable here? Interface target, which is this one, and my interface target is this one here. And now you can find it per drop and find per text, or you can just find it per, let me click this one again, this eyedropper here. This eyedropper means just select what you want, and I want you. So I have exactly selected this one here. And then after this is finished, we can save, we can go in. Actually, we can test this now, because now this one is set up. Let's write here. Let's make it separate. Let's write here. Select target from viewport, or yeah, select actor from viewport. Let's make it so, from viewport. Let's do this one. Let's make here this one and here. Okay, and here call the interface, and here call the interface, the interface, call the interface. Let's do this one, and with that let's make here comment, and let's say here interface just so for short. And we have set this up. So with that said, we can test it now. All right, that was just a setup that all is clean. Okay, and now let's see what happens, if it's working or not. And interesting is, when you go to the documentation, there is also something interesting. Perhaps I make something wrong, but I'm not sure. It says, when you read here a little bit through, it has here two requirements, which is this one here. Both blueprints implements the same interface with the required functions, and this is anyhow strange formula I mean, perhaps my English is so bad that I don't understand it. It is not good, but I don't see why I have implemented in both blueprints, because I just need one blueprint which I want to, for example, do something. And here is my caller. My caller don't have to implement this one. So you can see my caller was this box, right? And my box is this trigger box. And this trigger box has not implemented this interface because I'm just calling it. And that's why I'm not sure if I'm 100% if this is absolute right, but you can test this. Perhaps this is another setup for another scenario, not the same as mine, but let's continue with this one because I'm sure that this one here is working. So let's go start here. So I do again all time the same. What we expect, I go in and this light should go off. Yes, it worked. So my interface call here worked. My setup worked. That's nice. But with that said, I think we covered now interface, but now comes the problem. Or let's say not the problem. Now comes, let's say, the general talk about interface and all the other things combined, which I'm not going to do in this video, because now we will figure out how we use our interface more efficient, how we use other things more efficient. Now we will try to figure out what is more efficient. This version with interfaces, with dispatchers, with direct access, with getting all actors of class, and then we will talk a little bit about performance and so on. And here one more note. Perhaps I should say this one too before I go on to the general talk. And the thing is, you probably heard interfaces are cool because you don't have to know the type. And in my example, which I have made here, you have to know the type because, and the reason, where is that? Here. And the reason for that is because this interface call needs a target at least here. It still needs a target. And when you hear something like, but you don't have to know the type, because here, this one is actually specifying the type. You can see I have here variable type, which is actor. We can avoid this here, but with a special, in a special case. And the special case I want demonstrate you in the next video when I talk about performance, which means where we can make our interface more effective. But I think I should show you one more thing, so not that you think this is only now still bad. I should show you that you can now, of course, implement this interface to anything you want. For example, here I have this blueprint. I want that this blueprint should do something. Then you can find another blueprint in your face and do the same thing like what we did here. You can just do exactly that. What you have to do is you find the next blueprint, like I found this light here. Then you go in this blueprint which you found, add it this interface. What you have, and this is not my blueprint, this was my blueprint, and then you can add it here. Then you have added the blueprint interface, and then you can decide which functionality. And when you add this functionality, the nice thing about this kind of stuff is you start all time with this node, and you can define what the other thing should do. So you don't have to make, if let's say if you have here, for example, this cross here, and I want just destroy it, you can just implement the interface, but make then call this event activate or something like that, and then implement not this here, then you implement just destroy actor, for example. And so you can see all the interfaces has their own implementation which you are defining in the blueprint itself. And that's why it's so powerful, because you get only here the structure here, this is the interface. Let's say here's our activate, and then you define in every selected blueprint where you add the interface how this activate here should, what this activate should do. In one case you can say, okay, turn off the light. The other case you say, okay, you get destroyed. And the other case, let's say this here, this effect here, you change the color or something like that, and so on. All right, I think I stop here, but we are not finished with interfaces. Like I said, we will talk about performance, about all the confusion, because in one of my videos I said interfaces itself, it's very straightforward, and you see it is not difficult, it is straightforward. You just create it and then you just implement it, and that's it. But I said also in one of my first videos that interfaces cause problems because this implementation is not what they want to see. Most time this one here, what I showed you, this direct implementation is not that what they want to see. And the reason for that is they want to see, normally they start to talk about performance, they start to talk about access, different kind of access ways. They start to talk about, yeah, many things, and I will start to talk about this one in the next video when I compare it to the all other kinds what we learned. That's very important to say here at last. We will compare it to all that what we learned so far, which means Not all, there are only 4 ways I think we learned so far, or 5. And we will compare it now each other and check a little bit now the performance and the access possibilities and so on. With that said, I talk too much again. If you have any questions or any complaints like old time, or even tips and tricks, write them also in the comments. And yeah, with that said, good luck, bye, and see you in the next.